Okay, good day. Welcome, everybody. We appreciate you joining us for another Gimmal education session. My name is Marcia Shields, and I'm from our customer success team. Our goal for these sessions is to enhance your expertise with your Gimmal software. We are recording this session, and it will be shared after the event, as well as posted to Gimmal's YouTube channel. Jeff Tuish is with me today. Jeff will be your subject matter expert for all things Gimmal Discover for today's session. Jeff's going to be reviewing how the application can be used to assess RIOT data. Jeff, next slide, please. And for those who might just be joining or are keeping track, we are still doing our Gimmal All-Star program. So for participating, signing up, registering in our Gimmal education sessions, you're earning points. So we appreciate you being here and hope to reward you for your efforts. Once you get to 3,000 points, you will get a Gimmal All-Star pin. Format for today will still be 15 to 20 minutes of product demonstration with Jeff, followed by time for your questions. If you do have any questions, please post them in the Q&A area on your Zoom bar, and we'll be sure to address them once Jeff is done with his presentation. Before I totally hand the reins over to Jeff, I'm going to just launch a quick poll. Gimmal is at a variety of events this month and over the next course of the next few months, actually. And we'd love to know if you'd be going to any of these. Typically, when we are on site, our team might have some customer events. So if you're going to be there, we'd love to include you. So I'll leave that poll up for a bit, Jeff, as other people roll in. But other than that, I think you were good to go.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcia.
You bet.
All right, guys. Let me get my mouse to work. There we go. So today we're going to be talking about RIOT data. So most of you probably have heard of ROT, which is redundant, obsolete, and trivial. We've added an I into it to make it RIOT. Sounds a little chaotic, but what it actually means is that we have also inaccessible data. So what is inaccessible data? What that means is that files that were created by an application that you probably no longer have, such as WordPerfect or Lotus 123, for example. So what we're going to be able to do with that is to be able just to show you, most likely, this inaccessible data is going to be trivial, because if you can't open it, what's the point of having it? So we're going to be talking about the process of how we go through and do the analysis of RIOT data and all the things that we can do for you, as well as I'm going to show you a Power BI report. One of my biggest things I love right now is Power BI. Give you some nice visualization of some data that we processed and give you an idea of what we found and highlight some of the things within it. So you'll see here some of the business implications of having RIOT data. I'll let you read that to yourself. I'm not a fan of reading off a slide to anybody. So how about we jump to the next slide here and talk about the methodology. So what we typically recommend is we're going to go through, and first off, we're going to tell you what we found. So just going out and looking at files by their extension, by their age, and we're going to be using Windows file paths today, meaning that we'll have both a creation, modification, and an access date. So I have all three of those. So that's the first analysis, just to get some insight to all that. And then we go through and say, okay, when I get ready to remediate data, I'm ready to delete things. If you have a retention policy in place, such as maybe anything older than 10 years by the last modified date, there might be some files that you want to keep longer. And that's because they are things that maybe are proprietary or privileged, contractual, whatever they might be. And that's where classification comes into play. So what Gimmal Discover can do with classification is it can look at metadata and or content and make decisions for you, and then apply the label of your choosing. So the labels, is you have carte blanche to those. The criteria the same way. You would specify, I want to know file names by their wildcard, or I want to know what files are older than a certain number of days, or whether they have the word addendum inside of the file, which would denote a contract. All of that is done with the classification module. The whole point of that is when it comes time to start deleting data, we can use that classification information to make sure that we are excluding things that you want to keep longer. There's some other actions you could take, like we can move it somewhere else, but having that classification on there is really a plus. Now, would you classify everything? Most likely not. You're only going to classify things, once again, invoices, contracts, privileged, proprietary, anything like that, you can put a classification on. We have clients that go from having 4 classification labels to 100. So once again, your call. Then we're going to work on obsolete data next. So why obsolete first? A lot of people want to do the redundant data first. Like, I know I have duplicates. And yes, I understand that. However, if you are going to have a policy enforcement saying anything older than 10 years, and all of your duplicates are older than 10 years, instead of having to determine which duplicate wins and which one loses, how about we get rid of the obsolete data first? So this is going to be a big hit on the amount of data that you have, and it's going to really help with your cleanup. So going through and performing that. So probably one of the questions you're asking yourself is, well, do I just go out and start deleting? Absolutely not. So this is going to be an iterative processing that we're going to be doing. In fact, the classification is going to be iterative because you're not going to get it right the first time. You're using a series of keywords or Boolean expressions. You might need to perfect that as you go. So we would go through and simulate the classification. We would simulate the deletion, produce report after report after report until you feel comfortable. Then, okay, now I'm ready to pull the trigger and start deleting. So we get rid of our obsolete data first. Then we move on to our inaccessible data. Once again, you probably can't open that. So this will allow you to go through and delete things with those extensions that are no longer of value to you. And then going to the trivial. And that's probably the most subjective of the 4 of these is the trivial data, because maybe particular extensions, maybe there's AVI files or PNG files, whatever they might be, that you know, hey, I don't need those in my organization. I can get rid of those. A lot of the things are things that do with games or things to do with music, which probably aren't business related. That's the kind of trivial stuff you can go after. And then lastly, you do your redundant. Get rid of the redundant data. Files that are redundant. And how do we determine a file redundant? I'm going to be showing you that on the Power BI stuff, so I'll be sure to point that out in a bit. So where do we begin? Well, we start with the analysis. We collect all the stats on everything we have out there. We say data items. This could be both for files, which I'll be showing you today. So things like Box and Google Drive, OneDrive, SharePoint, Windows file shares, or it could be messages in PST files, Exchange mailboxes, Gmail. So data items is sort of an aggregate of those two together. So it gives you, once again, gives you some insight on what's out there. So what we're going to do is, for this process, we have everything templatized. So we have a workflow that we would put into your Gimmal Discover instance. You would nominate the data that you want us to process. We're going to create a policy, we're going to run it, and we're going to get some reports out of it. Once we get those reports, then we're going to put it into our templatized Power BI template that we have that's going to ingest those CSV files and allow us to see what that data looks like. So let's go look at that. So I'm going to stop this and I'm going to jump over to this process. So here we are. We went through and did an analysis of the data. So these are 11 different Power BI pages that we have within one report. And what we're doing here first on the left-hand side is just giving you stats. How many data targets, or in this case, UNC paths, did I process? How many total files did it have? How many were accessible versus inaccessible? Their total size. How many different extensions did we find? How many dupes did we find? And I'll be covering that on the duplicates page. Their total size. And then we have another process that goes through and says we have confidence of both a high and medium level that you could delete files that match either one of these. So in this case, almost 18,000 files we have high confidence on. And I'll be explaining that to you as we get into the confidence page. And then lastly, just showing you some timing, how quickly, because we're not going through content at this point. This is only going through the metadata. So the size, the extension, and the dates. That's the information we're getting. And then these pie charts just show us the inaccessible versus accessible, the dupes versus non-dupes, and then the medium and high confidence. So first thing we do is we want to give you some stats. So this is simulating having data out on a Windows file share with user folders. So we're just giving you an idea of who the hoarder is in the group. And we're going to notice here, user number 8 definitely wins the prize with 92,000 files. So just giving you an idea of what we found out there, not anything particular about it, just inventorying the information. Then we get into the obsolete portion of RIOT. And this is using the creation date the modified date, and the access date. And we picked 10 particular date ranges. Yours could be whatever you want. These are the ones we did, and just showing you how many files total we found per range and other information regarding each one of these. Same thing holds true for the modified. So we're doing the same thing because you could use creation modified or access date as your way of saying, these are the files that I want to keep. So this is your obsolete path here in determining. And once again, you would produce a report like this just to give you an idea of what you have. So maybe you say, okay, I want to go out and I want to use the creation date, and we're going to delete anything older than 10 years old. So I'm doing some quick math here. 26, about 33,000 files. So roughly 20%, maybe 19% of the files are older than 10 years old. Maybe you could delete those right off the top. So it just gives you some nice information to make some decisions. Then we get into the extensions. So these are not particular extensions we're looking for. These are all the extensions we found. I have done this, and I've seen people with 5,000 different extensions, because sometimes you have software that creates extensions with dates or time on them. So these extensions could be a wide variety of things. But what we're doing is we're breaking down for you and showing you how many do we have that are accessible and inaccessible. And if it's inaccessible, we're taking our best guess of what file or what application, excuse me, created that file. And then, in fact, we're going to call out the inaccessible by themselves and let you see some of the things out here that are possibly files that you could treat as trivial and delete based upon their extension. Then we get into the duplicates, and I promise you, I'll tell you how we're determining duplicates. You'll see here down at the bottom. We go out and we use the content of the file only. We don't care where the file is, what its name is, what folder it's in. What we care about is the content. If any two files have the same hash, which is a 32-character hexadecimal number, then those files are duplicates. And what we're showing you here is how many duplicates we have. This is not including the originals. This is how many true dupes we have sitting out there by extension. Then we get into the confidence. And this is going to show you the different things that make up the high confidence versus the medium confidence, and give you some nice little pretty pie charts here to get some ideas. So once again, here we have 475 music files and 1,800 files associated with games. And we found files that have the word delete somewhere in their folder or file name, or backup in there, or temporary internet. So a lot of things that are common places where people keep data and never clean it up. And then the last one that breaks down the data, we show you the high versus medium confidence based upon the extension. And then we wrap it up with this one, which is the most impactful as far as I'm concerned. We're going to use a tachometer here, if you remember tachometers from cars with standard transmission. And we're showing you ones that are pegging red. Green and yellow are our recommended percentages of data. And we'll see from here that we have a problem with all 6 sites. So created, modified, and access dates, as well as dupes, high and medium confidence. So once again, the amount of work for you is very minimal. All we have to do is install Discover in your environment. You nominate the data, and then we run the policy, which produces a report. We take that report, and then we export into CSV files, which feeds into Power BI. So it's a really nice process, and something that you would give as an artifact. You would get all this information to be able to have some insight into your data. Okay, let's go back to the slides, and let's pour through some of these. And we were here. So here are the different ones. Once again, some things that we can do with identifying the different types of data. Once again, I'm not going to read off these for you, but going through and processing all of this. So we can go, and we also do a sensitive data assessment. So looking for typically credit cards and or social security numbers. Most companies are very concerned about breaches occurring and people having access to personal information. And that should be a concern, honestly. So what this is showing us is the percentage of credit cards we found in files, socials, and then keywords. We allow you to provide us with the criteria for the Boolean expression that you want us to find, and then we aggregate it up to a total. And just giving you the same kind of information that we did with this, what it does for you is it is a zero cost and a little bit of your time, and I'm talking a little bit, maybe 2 hours, because all you have to do is point us at your data and typically recommend, give us a set of data that you think might have some issues with it. And then we can go out and be able to search it and show you the results to give you some ammunition to say, hey, we do need to clean up our data. We do have a problem. Because if you're like most companies, you don't know what you don't know out there. People are hoarders. I'm not judging because I'm probably one as well. But it's nice to get some insight as to what the heck's out there. So with that, I hope that was out rattled off a lot in that. I'm hoping that helped a little bit. And Marcia, we're going to open it up to some questions if there are any.
There are. My video is coming back. There we go. Yeah, great job, Jeff. Good information, of course. And yeah, and if anybody is interested in talking more one-on-one about these assessments, you can reach out to me or your Gimmal representative, and we'll be happy to talk you through that. Jeff, first question we have is, does duplicates look for calendar items?
Duplicates are, so yes. So there's a lot of duplicates in email. So if I send an email to Marcia and 2 other Gimmals, and then we went through and said, hey, are there duplicates? All of us are going to have the exact same email as long as there's not a BCC by the sender, of course, because that doesn't get shown to everybody else who's a recipient. And nobody changes the message after they receive it, of course. But yes, that would apply to messages, calendar items, tasks, all the different types of items that are in a mailbox.
Okay, great. Okay, second question we've got. Are the classification tags you mentioned handled within Gimmal Discover as well, or do those have to be in place before applying the Gimmal Discover tool?
No, those are in Gimmal Discover. So you would define your labels, and then in a process we call a workflow, which allows you to put in your criteria. That's where you'd put your criteria in and say, under these conditions, apply this label. And if that doesn't apply, it's going to go to the next condition. How about this? Is there a match here? No, there's not. Then go to the third. Oh, there's a match in the third. I'm going to apply that label. So that's how it works. You get to set up what's basically a horizontal check of looking for different instances of data inside those files or messages. And then when we find a match, we apply that particular label that's associated with that criteria.
Okay. Another question is, do you always recommend classifying the data items prior to performing any remediation?
I do. I'm a black and white person, and I wish the world was black and white, but unfortunately it's not. So having a policy that says anything older than 10 years, we're going to delete, that's great sounding, but probably not practical. So yes, looking at content and having the classification, knowing that it's a file that needs to be kept longer than its retention period, I think is very, very important.
Okay. Another question is, can the data owners be part of the remediation approval process?
Oh, data owners. Okay. So what's a data owner? So like if we were looking at a user's folder on a file share, can we alert John Smith, hey, John, we're going to delete your data? So let's talk a little bit about philosophy on this. So honestly, if you're going to allow the users to make decisions on your data, they're never going to approve anything for deletion. Let's be honest. It's a reason it's there is because they don't delete themselves. They don't use the delete key. They're not going to let anybody else delete it. So the philosophy is, a recommended one, is to you get together with all the leadership in your company. You guys decide on what the retention is. And when it comes time to delete, you don't think, you do. So instead of going, hey, are you sure we need to delete this? Look, we've already made those decisions. We've taken into account all the different permutations of that. This falls under this, and away we go. The best example of that is, in fact, I believe it's our next education session, is one of our biggest use cases for Gimmal Discover is enforcing email retention policies. And believe me, the users don't have the ability to say, hey, don't delete my email. Too bad, so sad. It's the company's email. And we have a 90-day retention policy. 90 days, it's gone. You can't do anything about it. The same should apply to the files. I know it's very emotional, cultural, whatever you want to call it, maybe political regarding deletion. But if you make those decisions up front, then you don't have to worry about checking when it comes time to pull the trigger and delete. Sorry for the preaching on that, but that's That's
No,
definitely an important thing to do.
you got a shout out and a thank you from one of our attendees today.
Oh, awesome.
So that's great. Yeah, even thank
Whoops,
you,
sorry about that.
Bessie. Yeah, they said they did this for email and nobody has ever asked. So great tip and glad it's resonating. That's great.
That's the thing, it's funny because it's not to equate users to small children. If you ever had small children and they keep asking why, and finally you say, because I said so. This is the legal reason is because I said so. We're deleting your email. Everybody has to conform to this. It is what it is.
Mhm. Jeff, one more question for you, at least so far. Excuse me. Can Discover use the folder name to determine if a specific extension is trivial?
Yes, in fact, you can use any metadata. So what you can actually do in the Gimmal workflow is it is a set of criteria. You have decision points. And in those decision points, you can check any metadata value and or content, but you can also stack those. So you could say, okay, the file has to be older than 10 years. Check. Is it within this particular folder? No, it's not. Check. Does it have this extension? No, it doesn't. Check. Now I can delete it. So you can actually go through and build these steps taken in multiple criteria, basically and conditions. Everything has to be true for this file to be a candidate for deletion. If it's not, then you can go horizontally and say, okay, that wasn't true. Maybe I have something else to check. So you can make up these permutations, and there are literally millions of them mathematically because of the different combinations. And we have two clients doing the same. So you can use all the different metadata to make your decisions on that. And once again, including the content. Now, what I always recommend is content is last. And why is content last? Because content is the most expensive process. It takes longer to look at content in a file than it does to look at some metadata. So what you would do is you do all your metadata checks first. It's like, okay, the first 3 answers were yes. Now I'm going to look at the content. If that's also a yes, now I want to delete.
So on that, we did get one more question.
Okay.
Can the list of inaccessible extensions be easily changed?
Yes, because if we have ones in there that you don't feel are inaccessible, like for instance, I know that I actually come from no mocking now, I come from a Lotus Notes to IBM Notes, which is now HCL Notes background. So Lotus Notes is one of the things that were on there. If you're still using Notes for anything, in the Power BI is where all that logic is. So you don't have to rerun the policy in Discover. Power BI has that intelligence. We would simply remove that row from the table, and now the NSFs would no longer be classified as inaccessible.
Okay, perfect. That's all the questions, Jeff. Good job. Good job.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can we go to the next slide, please?
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, for everybody to know, that is the conclusion of today's session. I would appreciate you being here, obviously. This is what's upcoming on the schedule for Q2. If you have not seen this, you could go to our Gimmal events page to get any of these. And we do send the week before reminders of each session. So if any of these ever interest you across any of the products, we certainly welcome you to join us. We will email the recording of this session after, but you can also find these on our YouTube channel. And if you have any suggestions for an education topic, don't be shy. Please email this to me. We're always looking for new ideas. Jeff, I think there's one final slide. Yeah, and thank you for answering our poll question about the events that you're attending or not attending, but this is what's upcoming in Gimmal's world. We also have a webinar that you'll be learning more about May 6th with Kim Tran and Susan Lamb. So please be on the lookout for that. But otherwise, we hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.